Scotland's star player Billy Gilmour has tested positive for COVID just days after Scotland's clash with England at Wembley. So far, only 2 English players, Mason Mount and Ben Chilwell, have been told to isolate after hugging Billy Gilmour. But after these players had further contact with their teammates, could more of the England and Scotland sides be at risk of missing their next matches?
Well, we're joined by former Scotland player Pat Nevin, who says if the authorities can say they should continue to play, so be it, and former England goalkeeper David Seaman, who thinks there seem to be different isolation rules for different teams. And Dr. Hillary is here as well. So, very good morning to you both out there, the former football players. Pat Nevin, it seems absolutely remarkable that a Scotland player tests positive for COVID. He, understandably, goes into isolation, and the only other players who go into isolation are on the opposing team. Do you understand that?
Well, your surprise in your voice is echoed by mine, I have to say. I find it quite amazing, and especially, and as David will know this as well, quite often it's the case that footballers share rooms. Now, if he was sharing rooms, it may not be the case in these COVID times, but if he was sharing a room with somebody else over the last little while, then that would be a shock as well. However, and it's quite a big however, you have to listen to the medics. Public Health England have got their decisions to make. They will look at the circumstances. Now, in your package there, I noticed you said at the start, you know, that it was they had a hug at the end of the game. Then you qualified it by saying, and then the players met up afterwards. So that hug isn't it, you know, that one.
No, it was 25 minutes chat in the tunnel, apparently. Exactly. But it seems remarkable, Pat, that the only people Billy Gilmour chatted to were 2 players on the opposing team. I mean, does Billy Gilmour not talk to other players on his own squad? I mean, this is all stretching kind of credulity, isn't it? I'm not saying that they're not full. Of course, you're right. The medics are the ones to listen to. But the issue here is bigger, I would suggest, because there are children going home from school because somebody in their year group has tested positive for COVID. There are people going home from work because somebody within 2 metres has tested positive for COVID. The idea that players on a team aren't regularly in contact with each other, it makes people think, well, hang on a moment, is there one rule for the Scotland team and one rule for the rest of us?
Yes, and I have to say, your incredulity is mirrored actually by mine. But I still wouldn't argue with the medics who've looked exactly what's happening. It may well be, and I don't know if this is the case at all, but it may well be that within the Scotland squad, they're very serious about social distancing the rest of the time. You know, and Steve Clarke, he kind of runs a tight ship there, there's no doubt about that. So it could well be that he makes sure that the players don't spend any more than 20, 25 minutes together. Remember, Billy, he will have been checked, you know, whether it's PCRs or lateral flows, he'll have been checked every couple of days. So they'll know within a very short period of time when he was positive, when he became tested positive. What is quite interesting is how that happens. Remember, they're in a bubble. It's very hard to keep that bubble.
You make the point that they are being very strict about social distancing in the bubble. Someone, somewhere, had COVID that wasn't picked up before Billy Gilmour picked it up. So something's gone wrong, hasn't it?
Yeah, and who knows what that is, and they will look closely. Now, people might immediately think what has happened before with footballers is, you know, has the footballer misbehaved and met somebody else, you know, like a family member or whatever. Or it could be something simple, because somebody that's delivering something into the camp, someone who's working and, you know, with preparing food or whatever, it could be anything. There are a lot of people, you call it a bubble, but it's not a complete and utter bubble. People do come out from the outside sometimes. And they would love to be able to keep it a complete and total bubble, but it's almost impossible. And as soon as you come to the stadium, I was at Wembley. Now, you go in and you try the red zones and there's orange zones and there's different zones and a green zone as well. But, you know, there are slight crossovers of people who have to work at Wembley or places like that. I'm not blaming anyone. It's just that we don't know yet.
Yeah. David Seaman, the issue is a lot of people look up to football fans, or football players, they'll be looking at this and, you know, football players should set an example in this scenario. And it seems to me, and a lot of people have been messaging us this morning, it feels like one rule for football players and one rule for them at home.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I know what Pat's saying as well. Footballers, Scotland, they've come in on a coach together. They're in the same dressing room. So I don't understand why it's just two England players that have to isolate. And then going back to what you said about one rule for football, but they're all in a bubble. But I still don't understand why it's two England players that have got to isolate and no one from Scotland. Because surely the guys from Scotland have had a lot more contact with Billy Gilmour.
Yeah, we've not heard anything from Public Health England or the FA on details of that, but the suggestion is that it's just being precautious and being extra careful in this scenario, which you kind of understand. But the fundamental point, like you say, is why aren't other players self-isolating, particularly the Scotland players?
Yeah.
But at the same time, we are talking about a major football tournament. The consequence, David Seaman, is that if Scotland had to all self-isolate, the game just wouldn't take place tonight, would it? And that could really have a huge impact on the rest of the tournament.
Yeah, of course it would have to try. Well, they'd have to try and replay it, but if everybody's in isolation, how are they going to get time to do that? So yeah, the ramifications of it are endless. But at the moment, everything's on. The game's on. And we've got two England players that are not available. Apparently there's a meeting this afternoon where they may or may not be allowed to be in the squad. But even if they are allowed to be in the squad, that's no preparation of what's gone on in the last 24 hours to prepare for the game. Yeah, and it's not great preparation for Gareth.
Yeah, when there's disruption, as I know, simply as a parent of children who are at school and you're never quite sure if someone's supposed to be in the class or they're not supposed to be in the class. I mean, if you're a manager of a national team like Gareth Southgate and you're not sure whether two of your players are going to be available or not, that's not great preparation, is it? I mean, particularly Mason Mount, David Seaman, if he isn't available tonight, what sort of impact would that have?
Well, it will have an impact, but luckily for England and luckily for Gareth, he's got some great replacements to put in there. I've been looking at people like Bellingham to get a start. When we looked at it, mathematically, England are qualified. So the pressure is off England a little bit. Scotland really need to win today, to get the points to qualify. So it's we're okay, if you know what I mean. Yes. We are through, but. Yeah, the preparation's been thrown up in the air, but I'm sure that Gareth was thinking of making changes anyway. Now that we are qualified, it's a great chance to make those changes and maybe play some players that are not quite fit enough or haven't been fit enough, and to try some different formations.
Maybe start with Jack Grealish. Could be a nice start, I think. Now, Pat Nevin, big game. Let's talk about the football. Big game. For Scotland, I mean, they've got to win simply, haven't they? They've got to go out and they've got to beat Croatia. What do you think their chances are tonight?
I think the chances are okay because once again it's at Hampden Park. Scotland didn't play at their very best against the Czech Republic in the first game at Hampden Park. I was at that game as well. But they didn't play at the very worst either. They didn't have a lot of luck. With a little bit of luck and a little bit more belief, they are capable of doing it. They had that little bit more belief at Wembley. Again, I was behind the goal and looked at the players and then, wow, look at them training here. There's utter belief about that group of players. There's a lot of good players in there. I mean, Armstrong's still to come back into the middle of the midfield there. You've got McTominay, you've got McGinn. You've got players that are really living well and coping at the top level of the Premier League. And a lot of them will have grown with confidence, getting a brilliant result. And it was a great result for Scotland at Wembley. I know it was only 0-0, but we were such underdogs there. And the team played almost out of their skin to get that 0-0. Problem is, 1-0 defeat, or 2-0 defeat in the first game, 0-0 in the second game. They didn't have David Seaman in goals against us, but we don't seem to be able to score goals, and we need to score a goal. If we don't score a goal, we've no chance this time. So we're excited about it. We're up for it. We believe that we're capable of doing it, but we know Croatia are a very, very good side. We have to be on our game. They have to have a quite quiet game. But then again, That kind of happened against England for us at Wembley.
Yeah, well, look, really huge good luck. And David Seaman, you know, as you say, let much more pressure on Scotland. I mean, way more pressure on Scotland, much less pressure on England. But we have this COVID chaos, which is just casting doubt over everything. It's good to see you both this morning. Just, David Seaman, just briefly, you mentioned Jude Bellingham. He's only 17, isn't he? And for him to be stepping up onto this international stage, I mean, talk about coping with pressure. That's incredible.
Yeah, it is, and you know, everybody that I speak to, have got such praise for Bellingham. It reminds me of a very young Ryan Giggs when he first came out. Everyone was talking about him, and if Jude has half the career that Ryan had, then he's in for a great time.
Yeah. Well, let's hope he gets a go. I got a feeling he will do. I think it's a great opportunity tonight, isn't it, for Southgate to change things up a little bit. We shall see. Thank you, Pat Nevin and David Seaman, as always. You can follow all the action of the Euros on ITV. England face the Czech Republic tonight at 7 p.m. and Scotland versus Croatia is on ITV4 at the same time.